Over the decades, George Lucas found himself in situations where he had to make the decision to terminate people's employment. We're going to take a look at some of the more prominent examples of these firings, including one from decades ago that you may not be aware of. From deep in Lucasfilm history, John Dykstra was hired by George to supervise the new special effects company George had created, Industrial Light and Magic. John developed the Dykstraflex camera, for which he won a Technical Achievement Award at the 1978 Oscars, alongside Alva J. Miller and Jerry Jeffress. In addition, he took home the gold statue for the best visual effects for Star Wars that same year. But before the awards and the success of the film, there was drama. George returned from filming in England in the summer of 1976 to find only a few shots completed by John and his ILM team. While a heated argument ensued, George didn't fire John. When George moved and rebuilt ILM in Northern California for The Empire Strikes Back, John was not invited. John was angry and decided to take an offer from Universal to work on a new show called Battlestar Galactica. The ensuing lawsuits around stolen equipment and plagiarism are a story for another time. Gary Kurtz had a long working relationship with George as producer and story collaborator. Having worked on American Graffiti and Star Wars with Gary, George was unimpressed with the producer's work on The Empire Strikes Back, which was over budget and behind schedule. Although not credited, Howard Kazanjian was brought in as a second producer, a rival lieutenant of sorts to Kurtz. According to J.W. Rinsler's book, The Making of The Empire Strikes Back, Kurtz himself stated that it was an amicable separation based on both men's desire not to work together going forward. However, given Lucas's decision to bring in Kazanjian, it was a firing in all but name. The original cut of Star Wars by editor John Jympson was a disaster. The highly experienced British editor was fired after George had given him a grace period after providing more instructions. In the end, John was let go, and George himself, his then-wife Marcia, Richard Chew, and Paul Hirsch would edit the film, prompting Oscar wins in the process. Let's take a deep dive into the Lucasfilm archives. The June 1983 issue of Life magazine had an interesting piece on George. Many of the stories we're now aware of are told, such as his near-fatal car accident as a teen. However, one particular story goes into one Charles Weber, whom Lucas hired to run the business side of Lucasfilm. Weber insisted Lucasfilm stay in Los Angeles, at least partially. He suggested many good ideas that were implemented, such as using different companies for each film, thus reducing risk to Lucasfilm and George himself. Weber expanded the number of employees and spent money on a remodel of the LA property. Mythmaker, The Life and Work of George Lucas, goes into the details of the end of Weber's professional relationship with Lucasfilm. In fall 1980, after Fortune magazine published a piece entitled "The Empire Pays Off," ostensibly on George, but primarily about Weber, George was uneasy after reading some of the phrasing in the biased piece. The last straw was Weber suggesting the sale of Skywalker Ranch. George was furious. During contract renewal discussions when Weber visited George in Northern California, George told Weber that the LA office would close and that he would be demoted should he choose to stay. He quickly changed his mind and told Weber he was fired. Dozens of people at the LA office were also let go, although some were invited to move up to the Northern California office. George had a singular vision and a set of principles that he chose to remain firm on. When he felt clashes with employees compromised that vision and those principles, he made the tough decisions that owners of highly successful enterprises have to make. We'll end with a quote from George. "Project-based learning teaches civility and emotional intelligence, which we don't seem to value until it's too late. People don't get fired for being stupid. They get fired for not being able to work with other people.